Hello and welcome back to my channel, and happy new year, happy 2026. I am very much hoping this year will be better, not necessarily in terms of reading, just life, but yeah, happy new year and welcome back. If you've never been here before, my name is Ali. I like to talk to myself about books, and then maybe you may not watch this at a later date. And today, because I like to do things fashionably late, I bring you my kind of 2025 best and worst reads. So let's get started. So first of all, I have to say I was actually quite pleasantly surprised with when I was getting out the books. I have loads of like top reads of like the best books of 2025, and then not as many bad ones. So that to me is a win, and I'm quite happy because my main goal last year was to read better quality books, so books that I enjoyed more than 2024, and I think I did achieve that. But yeah, I mean, let's get started, I guess. And since we have less of the worst books, in my opinion, we can start with those. I do have to preamble this with the fact that these are the worst books that I read, in my opinion, this year. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad books, and it doesn't mean that I'm saying anything about people who enjoyed them. Just for me, they didn't work, and for me, I didn't enjoy them, and so for me, they are the worst books of this year. Well, last year now. But first of all, and I do also have to say that I don't own a lot of them physically anymore because I didn't like them, so I didn't want to keep them. But the first book, and probably the lowest rated book for me this year, was The Awakening, which is book 1 in the Zodiac Academy series by Suzanne Valenti and Caroline Peckham. I had obviously, as with everyone else, heard so much about the series. It seemed to be absolutely everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. Like, BookTok was full of it. So I was like, let me give it a go. It's romantasy. It's set around the Zodiac. Maybe I'll like it. I did not like it at all. There is a video back when I read it if you want to know more in-depth kind of views on that. But essentially we follow two twin sisters who without knowing get transported into this kind of like magical academy because they end up finding out that they are actually descendants of powerful fae, and there are like a number of houses in this academy, and it kind of relates to your affinity in terms of the kind of magic that you're able to work with. So there's things like fire, air, earth, wind, very Avatar. But yeah, so they end up going to this academy. Of course, they end up having more powers than anybody else, but also the main plot and storyline revolves around these like boys that they meet at the academy, and it's very much a bully romance, which turns out is very much not for me. Actually, I say turns out, I knew that, and I didn't know that this was a bully romance. So I probably, if I'd known that, would have known that it's not something that I would have enjoyed. But yeah, I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like any of the male love interests. They were all awful. But also the world building itself for me wasn't good. The depth of character for any of the like main characters wasn't well developed enough. The friendships were very superficial. The relationships in general were very superficial. So for me, it just wasn't a good book, and that's why it was my lowest rated book of the year. Next, this might be another controversial hot take for Bookstagram, BookTok, BookTube, and I'm really sorry, but also, as I said, this is my opinion only. I read the first 2 books in the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver, which were Flawless and, Heartless, I think. And I did also have Powerless, but I never read it. I have tried, okay? I have tried. I've tried repeatedly to enjoy cowboy romance and just contemporary romance in general, and I think now I know that I'm just gonna stick to my 2 trusted favourite contemporary romance authors, which are Ali Hazelwood and B.K. Borison, because I love their writing, I really love their books, I have a great time every time I read them, but every time I try to venture outside of those 2, it just doesn't work out for me. And unfortunately, Elsie Silver was just such a situation. I don't even really remember what happens in these books. I know we follow 2 characters in the first one, and then the second one we follow like the brother of one of the male love interests in the first book, and like the best friend of the female character in the first book. The relationships were weird and superficial. The smart was like meh for me, and also I just didn't like that writing style. Like, it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. So again, this is probably why I've rated it so lowly. So sorry, I should say that like my worst books of the year are all books that I rated 2 stars and below. So I think these ones I rated like 1.5 or like 1.75. I was being kind, it turns out. But thinking back on it, I think it was just because I couldn't bring myself to give Zodiac Academy 1 star because I felt mean, and so I gave it 1.5 star, and they were like marginally better than that. So yeah, unfortunately, Elsie Silver's not for me. And then I only had another 2 books that I didn't enjoy that much, enough to make it into kind of like my worst books of the year. One of them was The Vinyl Detectives. This was a book that was picked out as part of the Waterstones book club that I'm a part of, so it's not something that I ever would have picked out myself, and for good reason. It's just not the kind of book I would enjoy, and I knew this going into it, and lo and behold, I didn't enjoy it that much. It's kind of like a murder mystery, but it was kind of revolving around this guy who seems to know everything about everything to do with vinyls, and so he's a vinyl detective, and they kind of solve this crime based on like what they find, clues around like the music and the vinyl industry, etc. And I just didn't like it. I hated the main character. He was like insufferable, and I didn't like the plot at all or the storyline. It was just weird and just didn't make sense, and I didn't like it. So there's that. And the last book to kind of fall within that like 0 to 2 stars was this one, which is the only one I have kept, and that is Nightshade by Autumn Woods. And I can't bring myself to get rid of this because it's cute, and it's like I really like the art style. I really like the art, so I haven't managed to quite bring myself to get rid of it. And also I am a little bit intrigued to know what happens in the next one, but I think reassessing that now, I just have so many books to read that I just don't think that the sequel of this will make the cut, so maybe it is the one that I will get rid of. But in this one we follow Ophelia Winters. She is an orphan. Her parents died in like a weird accident at this university called the Sorosong University. They like crashed in a helicopter, and she knows that the truth of what happened is being hidden, and they warned her to stay away from the university before they passed away. So she gets offered a rare scholarship to go to this university. So obviously she does not heed that warning, and she ends up going to the university because she wants to investigate further what really happened to her parents, and she has in mind someone who would be the cause of their deaths. Now, she also ends up on her first day there bumping into this guy called Alex, who like picks her up because she's wandering like the dark streets at night in the rain, like heading towards the university. So he like drives her there, and then they end up kind of like bumping into each other. Now this university is really weird because there's loads of like, I don't know, like rich and famous kids, but of like mob families, like the mafia. You've got like the Italian, the Russian mafia. You've got like kids of really big like crime bosses essentially going to this university, and it's all a bit weird. It's all a bit weird. It wasn't great. Honestly, it was not great. The kind of insta love was too much for me. The actual plot itself was crazy, and I honestly didn't understand why the mafia needed to be involved at all in any way, shape or form. So I didn't enjoy it that much, but I really love the art on the front, and I don't want to get rid of it. So maybe I should just cut out the characters and get rid of the book. I don't know. Or maybe someone else will want this because it is a cute edition, so maybe I shouldn't spoil it. Oh, I don't know, but yeah, that's that. So So those were all kind of like my worst books of 2025, and now we go into my favourite books of 2025. So these are all books that I rated 4.5 stars plus. So 4.5, 4.75 and 5 stars, and there are so many. So just to give you an idea, I read about 140 books last year, so in 2025, and I have like upward of like 35 books that fall within this category. I haven't pulled them all out because some of them are part of the same series, so I will just talk about the series in general, but pretty good reading year. In 2025, I reread the entire, and can I find it in this pile of books? Unknown. I reread the entire Hunger Games series, ready to read Sunrise on the Reaping, which ended up being one of my favourite books of the year. However, having reread these, I also ended up rating the first 3 original books in the Hunger Games series, so Hunger Games, Catching Fire and Mockingjay. I ended up rating them high enough to fall within this category of books. The only one I didn't enjoy as much was A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't like Professor Snow, whatever his name is, and I didn't care about his backstory, and I felt that that one just wasn't as well developed and kind of like as heart-wrenching as the rest. However, Sunrise on the Reaping, as I said, ended up being one of my favourite books, and I think I ended up giving that one 5 stars, whereas I gave this entire series I think 4.5 stars, which is really good. And I don't know why I didn't give it 5 stars, thinking back on it. I think just maybe I already kind of had read it in my childhood and stuff, and it was a little bit, I guess, more YA for me. But also Katniss is not my favourite character. And then, like, this series obviously rolls around Katniss, and I find her a little bit annoying at times. If you, I don't know, have been living under a rock somewhere and don't know what Hunger Games is about, essentially it's a YA dystopian fantasy, YA dystopian fiction world where there is essentially different levels of society based on how close you are to the capital. So you've got the capital, and they kind of like lead the world, they're the richest people, etc. And then each kind of district outside of that, so you've got District 1, District 2, District 3, blah, 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 all the way up to 12, they like feed something back into the capital, and they get essentially rewarded based on what it is that they provide. So you've got like a district that provides the military, so they're kind of seen quite like higher up, and then you've got a district that kind of provides like coal, so like mines and stuff, so they're kind of like at the bottom, so that's District 12, and they are also the poorest district. And within that you've got kind of the outskirts of this district too, which is where Katniss, our main character, lives. Then every year they the capital run this game called the Hunger Games, whereby they pick a tribute from each well, actually a male tribute and a female tribute from each district to essentially fight to the death against all other tributes inside this arena for the purpose of entertaining the capital. And when Primrose, who is Katniss's sister, is chosen, she ends up volunteering in her place because Primrose is her younger sister. She doesn't want her to pass away. And essentially we just end up following the story, and there's like a revolution, etc. It's very good. It's a very good kind of dystopian revolution, kind of fighting back against the oppressor type vibe. And I really loved it the first time I read it. I really loved it the second and third time I read it, and I really loved it when I read it again this year. So I highly recommend Hunger Games if you've never read it before. I'm really hoping they bring out Sunrise on the Reaping in these editions, because I love them, they're so cute. And kind of sticking to the dystopian themes, I finally finished a duology that I started so long ago by reading Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. This is again another dystopian, more sci-fi-ish type story with a hint of fantasy. We follow a girl called Lauren in the first book who has the power to feel the pain of others. So if she is close to someone, once they are hurt, she will feel that same pain as if it was happening to her. And again, it's kind of happened in a kind of post-apocalyptic setting where it gives like zombie vibes, but I don't think there's actually any zombies in it, where they travel around and try to kind of re-establish society essentially. And it does have kind of some heavy connotations to like religion or kind of cultish behavior in relation to religion, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really loved this duology. I thought it was like super well written. I thought the characters were really interesting, and in this one in particular there's kind of like quite a few time jumps, and we do have different perspectives from different characters, and it all ends up kind of merging and aligning towards the end, which I really, really liked. So if you haven't read this, the first book is called The Parable of the Sower, and the second book is The Parable of the Talents, and it's a really, really good dystopian sci-fi duology, and I highly recommend. Next, I read the entire series, and the entire series does fall within this remit, let's call it, but I did read The Ember in the Ashes, which is a quartet. So there's 4 books, and I loved all of them. All of them I rated 4.5 stars or above, and I just curse myself for not having picked this series up sooner, because I really, really, really enjoyed it. This is a YA, I'd say, fantasy series, and we follow 2 characters, one of them being an orphan called Leia, who is the child of scholars, but also potentially the child of rebels. She has a brother, and she's been living with her grandparents until her brother is arrested for supposedly being linked to this underground rebellion. So she ends up deciding to infiltrate kind of the army side of stuff, who are the ones that kind of arrested her brother, to try and find out where he is and to rescue him. And once she does that, we come across our other character whose POV we follow, who is Elias. He's one of the Academy's finest soldiers, and he is being primed to become quite high up within the Academy and also in the army type thing once he finishes his kind of teachings. However, he does have this hidden secret whereby he doesn't agree with what the military is doing and with the oppression they are and kind of all the killing and stuff they are doing. So he's wanting to kind of desert the Academy. Only problem is that he's the son of one of the generals, who is again very high up and also very much unhinged. So we follow their stories as they cross paths, and you know, they head in different directions, come back together, things like that. And I really, really, really liked this series as well. Again, the world building was really good. It was kind of it does say it's Roman inspired, but to me there was also some kind of like Middle Eastern influences. There's things like jinns and stuff in here, which I think is more kind of Middle Eastern lore, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was quite unique. I'd not really read anything kind of set in that type of world before, and I really liked the way the characters developed, the way that like they changed, because they really do change across the 4 books. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the series, to be honest. I don't know what else I had to say. I could spend like a million years on all of these books, but there's too many. There's too many. Next, another sequel I read was He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. This is the sequel to She Who Became the Sun, which I read a few years ago, and then I just kept putting off picking up this one, and I don't know why, because I really, really enjoyed it. This is a kind of like a fantasy, low fantasy retelling of the Ming Dynasty in China, and it's a duology, so it's completed in 2 books, and it's just really, really good. It's very much heavy on the politics and on kind of the grimdark elements of things. Like, nobody here is particularly good, and the politics themselves are quite heavy, and it's really interesting to see, one, how that sort of like world works in terms of like people arising to power and how they can exert their power over others, but also just the relationships between the individual characters themselves I also found really, really interesting. And especially in this one, we follow 2 characters that were very much at odds in the previous book, that are having to kind of team up against like a worse enemy, and I really liked that. I thought this was really, really good. Like, this book had me screaming, holding my breath. I don't know what else to say. Very, very good. I highly recommend this duology. And yet another sequel, one that was very much anticipated for me, was The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. This is the sequel to Swordcatcher, also by Cassandra Clare, which I read, I think, when it was released, and I can't remember when that was, maybe 2024. But anyway, I read this year, and I managed to get my hands on the Illumicrate Special Edition to match my Swordcatcher one, which I'm super happy about because these are some of the most stunning books I own in terms of sprayed edges. It is signed, which is super cool. But again, really love this series, and this book in particular. I loved how it followed all the characters and kind of continued their stories, but also developed them throughout. And we do follow quite a few POVs in this one, some that I enjoyed more than others, but overall I really liked the book in general. So in Swordcatcher we follow this kind of like street urchin kid who is picked up from an orphanage to become the prince's sword catcher. So that is someone that looks like him to kind of attend events whereby the prince's life might be more in danger, and they don't want to kind of put the prince through that. So they grow up together. He's the sword catcher for the prince, and then there's this whole kind of, again, political subplot happening. There's a little bit of fantasy going on because we also follow this other character who is part of like this group of people that was kind of shunned by society, but she's got like healing powers and all she wants to be is a healer. But yeah, it's really good. Their paths, as I said, kind of cross back and forth. This one again is another one that had me holding my breath and screaming and being like, what the actual heck is going on? And I really loved it as well. So I'm a bit afraid to admit that I have not finished the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. I had read it, I think, when I was younger. I don't think I ever finished it when I was younger, and I definitely haven't finished it now. I've also never read the like Infernal Devices series either, and was like, actually maybe this is the one for me. I do have those to read, and maybe 2026 will be the year for them, but I really am enjoying the series and very much look forward to the next installment. I don't know how many books there are meant to be in total, but I'm hoping it's quite a few. At least three, obviously, because this ends on like an incredible cliffhanger and I need to know what happens next. I am incredibly aware that the majority of these books are fantasy, and I'm not sorry about it. It is what it is, but we do have a few that aren't. So next, one of my favourite books of 2025 was I Who Have Never Known Men. This is a very short book. It is dystopian and it follows a nameless character who has grown up as a child amongst other women in like a bunker underground. They then this like event happens and they end up being abandoned by the soldiers that are like kind of keeping them captive, and they end up escaping and going above ground. They go in search of other people because all they've known are like them that are in the bunker, so it's just women, and all of them are kind of older except for this one nameless girl that we follow, and they kind of like roam the countryside trying to find somebody else. But also we follow them throughout the years, and we try and basically follow their discovery of what happened, why they were in the bunker in the first place, because no one seems to remember, but also what's happened to kind of drive all the soldiers away, because they find clues that like maybe some sort of apocalyptic event happened and they just don't really know what's going on. So I really enjoyed this. I really liked kind of the eeriness of it, because you almost feel like you're within that world yourself because of how it's described and how little information you're given. You're finding out stuff alongside the character, so you don't have any more insight than she does, and it's just really interesting. I absolutely loved this book and would recommend it if you like dystopian. Next, another non-fantasy book. I say non-fantasy, it's also not fantasy. I don't really know what to describe this book as, but it is one of my favourite books I read this year, and that is Shark Heart by Emily Habick. This was actually one of the first books I read of the year as well, I think. I'm pretty sure I read it early on in 2025, and I absolutely loved this. This book made me cry so much, and maybe, I don't know, it was because things were going on as well, but like I absolutely adored this. So we follow two newlywed characters, so Lewis and Ren, who have just got married, and unfortunately Lewis is diagnosed with a rare degenerative condition that will get worse and worse with time, whereby he will retain his consciousness and kind of like memories and stuff. However, his body will slowly start turning into the body of a shark, which means he will no longer be able to control his like impulses in terms of like aggression and stuff, but also will no longer be able to do what he was able of doing beforehand, in that he won't have legs, so he won't be able to walk as much, he will only be able to eat certain types of foods, and then at a certain point he will need to live in the water. And we follow Ren, Lewis and some of Ren's family as they kind of go through these changes that are getting progressively worse, and it's very much an allegory, I think, on like dealing with a loved one's slow progression into a degenerative condition, whether that be a physical condition or a mental condition, because we also do follow something that kind of implies it's a bit more like Alzheimer's or dementia, etc. Whereas I think the main storyline in this does follow something that somewhat resembles things like cancer. But yeah, I found it absolutely heartbreaking, and I really did enjoy though the way that it was captured in such a like surreal way, and the metaphors that were used for it I found really interesting, but it was absolutely heartbreaking in a good way. I very much love this book and I would recommend it, but do heed the trigger warnings, it is upsetting. Next, I finally caved in and read a series that my partner had been telling me to read for like, I don't know, since the dawn of time, and that is the Horus Heresy series, which is set in the world of Warhammer 40k. Now, if you don't know what Warhammer is, it's a tabletop RPG game, which, I don't know, it's got different things. So you've got like a fantasy version, but there's also like a more kind of fantasy space version, which is what this is. So this is set 40,000 years after the end of the world as we know it, essentially. And we follow this like godlike creature who has these sons called Primarchs, who are essentially his I don't know, his like war masters and kind of like heads of armies, etc., to try and conquer the world. He refuses to admit that he is a godlike creature, but expects to be treated as such. And yeah, we kind of follow Horus, who is one of these Primarchs, and I was honestly pleasantly surprised. I ended up getting my friend to read these books as well, and she ended up binging them and being addicted to. This is the original trilogy, which is Horus Rising, False Gods and Galaxy in Flames, but there are like so many books within this world, and you can kind of follow different pathways according to what you're interested in. So there's things like detective stories, there is more sci-fi based ones, there's more fantasy ones, there's like older ones that are kind of like more fantasy lore, but I really like these. Now, if you like grimdark, this is pure grimdark. Like, I've never read anything quite as grimdark as this. Nobody is good. Literally not a single character within this world is good. They are all absolutely horrific, awful, war criminals, whatever you want to call them, but I don't know, it's not like you even end up liking them in terms of actually liking them, but you do end up being invested in the stories and wanting certain things to occur. So for me, I think at the moment I'm definitely of a certain camp within which side I'm on by the end of this trilogy, but yeah, none of them are good. None of them are good, but I absolutely loved it. And again, I was very much put off by this series because I thought, one, I've never really like been into Warhammer, don't really know it, don't play tabletop RPGs, not really into that. And also I have always been a little bit on the fence about like really heavy sci-fi set in space. But this year has changed me, and also this is very much more like fantasy set in space rather than like pure sci-fi, so I ended up really loving it. And I think for me it was a gateway into sci-fi in some way, because I will go over it in a second with the next series. But I really love this, highly recommend it if you want some fantasy, some grimdark, some space-based sci-fi type books. Please look no further and do check these out, and don't be put off by the fact that they are Warhammer, because that's actually really good in this case. And because I just mentioned sci-fi and kind of how I think Horus Rising was a little gateway for me, I then read all the books that are currently out. So that is 6 books currently out in the Red Rising series, and I did read them all. So I have the last one here because I didn't want to hold all of 6 of them up, but we have Red Rising, Golden Sun, Morning Star, Iron Gold, and Dark Age, and Lightbringer. So 6 books at the moment, and the 7th and final book is due to come out this year in 2026, and it will be called Red God, and I cannot wait. Now, as I said, I wasn't sure what to expect of the series because historically I haven't been like the biggest fan of like pure sci-fi, but this year has absolutely changed me. This is again very much kind of like grimdark. I described the first book as like Hunger Games in space, and I stand by that, but more grimdark. More grimdark. And even the good characters are not good. So there are actually no good characters, but there are characters that I absolutely adore. But essentially we follow, again, this society that is split into some sort of caste system, this time based on colours. So you've got the Golds that are kind of like the rulers of society, and right at the bottom you've got the Reds. The Reds are currently stationed in Mars. They live underground because they are mining the underground ready for the surface of Mars to be made habitable for their future generations. Or so they think, because at a certain point our main character Darrow and his wife Io discover that actually the surface of Mars has been habitable for a long time, and the Golds have been exploiting the Reds to continue to do their dirty work without giving them the rewards that they were so much promised. So eventually Darrow and Io end up going up to the surface to have a lovely little night out under the stars, and that sets off a sequence of events whereby Io is unfortunately murdered by a Gold, and Darrow ends up being taken to infiltrate the academy that the Golds are trained at to take them down from within. And I won't tell you exactly how that happens or kind of what happens, but we do follow Darrow and all the friends we come across through very many years. So you've got the original trilogy, which is Red Rising, Golden Sun and Morning Star, and then there is a gap and you've got Iron Gold, Dark Age and Lightbringer, which happens like a few years after the end of the events in Morning Star. Now, I love this series. I am obsessed. It's definitely one of my 2025 obsessions. I wasn't able to go to the Piers Brown event this year, and I hate myself for it, and I really hope he comes back next year when he releases Red God, because I need to meet him. I need to tell him all about how he's ruined my life in the best ways, and he's not the only one this year because many people have ruined my life in the best ways. But I absolutely adore this series, and it just gets better and better. Like, I would say, as I said, the first book is maybe a little bit slower and it is a bit more like Hunger Games in space, and it's more focused around setting up the scene of the world, kind of what the situation is. We meet like our main characters, and it is set in kind of this academy setting whereby they have to like pass certain trials, etc. But after that it just kind of gets better and better and better and better, to the point where like I gave it 5 stars because that's the most you can give it on like Fable and Storygraph, but it's like 1,000,000 stars. I don't know, I absolutely adore this series and I'm obsessed and I haven't stopped thinking about it. And if you haven't read it yet, what are you waiting for? Read it. And in that same camp, this year in 2025 I read books 2 and 3 of the Empire of the Vampire series by Jay Kristoff. So here we have Empire of the Damned, which I rebound to match my Empire of the Vampire, and also Empire of the Dawn, which is the last book in the trilogy. I don't have that yet because the paperback is currently not out, and these were paperbacks rebound, so I need it to be the same size. But I did read that on Kindle because I bought it on Kindle because I couldn't wait. I cannot wait a year to read the end of that series. I have spoken about this series at length, so literally any video from 2025 will probably feature it in some way, shape or form. So I don't want to bore you too much, but in this series we follow Gabrielle de Leon. Gabrielle de Leon is a half human, half vampire who is a Silver Saint. They are an order of gifted individuals who are trying to reclaim the earth for humanity from the vampires, because a kind of big post-apocalyptic type event occurred called Day's Death, whereby the light of the sun changed to permanently be so low in level that the vampires were able to kind of roam the earth and rule it throughout the day. So we follow him, and in the first book we actually start off by him being captured. So he is currently being interviewed by a vampire who has captured him. He's in their cells, etc., and it's a lot of kind of flash forwards, flashbacks of like the current situation where he's in the cell, and then he flashes back to his childhood, how he found out who he was, how he ended up becoming a Silver Saint, and then also how he ended up coming across the Holy Grail and all of that storyline. Now, Jay Kristoff has never been shy about the fact that he loves to ruin people's lives and destroy their emotions and their souls, and that is exactly what he does in this entire series. Like, again, another one I haven't stopped thinking about, another one I would have given 1,000,000 stars to if that's something that you can do on these kind of recording platforms, but in my mind that is what I did, especially Empire of the Dawn. I liked this one, but Empire of the Dawn was just insane. And yeah, broke me. I cried, I screamed, I literally had to, like, much like the Red Rising series, put the books down at certain points because I was like, I cannot cope right now. I cannot cope with this right now. This is, yeah. Many books were threatened to be thrown at walls, but I would never harm a book in that way. But the threat was there. So yeah, again, another series I absolutely loved. Another one that is very much like kind of grimdark, but I think they're like slightly less bad when they're bad. Or so I keep telling myself. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It is obviously set in a world with vampires and stuff, so it was kind of more fantasy, a bit different. And it's been a while since I've read a kind of vampire story that I've really, really loved. And I'm super, super happy that it ended up being this series. And I ended up actually meeting Jay Kristoff, and he signed my books for me, and I'm super, super happy. And I ended up giving him a copy of a drawing I had made of Gabrielle de Leon, which was super cool. But you'll be able to see in like one of the videos that I'll link down below of when I met him and John Gwynne, which was very, very cool. But yes, if you haven't read Empire of the Vampire, do read it. It is one of my favourite series of 2025 and also ever. So please read it. And now we're going back to a non-fantasy, non-sci-fi book, and that is Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have said this 1,000,000 times, and I will say it 1,000,000 times more. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of my favourite authors ever when it comes to historical fiction or contemporary writing, and I have absolutely adored every single book I have read of hers, and I have read everything she has published, literally everything, including her short essays. So this one is signed by the author, which is super cool. Again, I wasn't able to go see her in real life, but I was very glad to get this special edition, which is signed. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a Nigerian author who does do a lot of Nigerian-based historical fiction. So in some of her previous books, such as Americana, Purple Hibiscus, or The Yellow Sun, is it a Yellow Sun? Half of a Yellow Sun, we do follow kind of like historical events in Nigeria during a time of kind of political and social turmoil, and I really, really loved those. And then this one again is set more in contemporary world, so this is set kind of around the 2020 COVID pandemic, and we follow a number of different women. I think it's like 4 different women who are kind of linked in some way, but you don't know until you're reading it how they know each other or are linked. And we follow their different stories and kind of how their childhoods and their upbringings can have impacted them in adulthood, but also how they are then coping with the pandemic as it's unfolding. And I really, really loved it. I thought it was, as much as all her other books, just incredibly well written. I loved her writing style, and I just loved the characters in this as well, from a kind of way they are developed, not necessarily like I love them as a character, but it's just how they are described and developed I found really, really interesting and really engaging. So I really, really love this. If you're wanting something that isn't fantasy, I can highly recommend Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's anything she's written. Amazing. And then literally all of the other books I have apart from this one are fantasy, so I'll go with this one. This is, I guess, kind of like satirical horror is what I like to call it, but this is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This was the first book by Grady Hendrix I read in 2025, and then I read everything that I had that I could get my hands on. So I ended up reading Horrorstör, My Best Friend's Exorcism, Final Girls support group, and also Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I loved absolutely all of them. I did only pull this one out because, again, I don't want to hold up all of the books, but I did love all of those books I just mentioned. So for me, Grady Hendrix is definitely a new favourite author, and I'm really enjoying all of his books. I think I have one more that he's already published that I need to read, which is like How to Sell a Haunted House, and then I'm just going to be waiting for him to churn out more books. But I absolutely love his writing style. It's very much satirical, like taking the mickey out of like different horror vibes. I really like his writing. I very much look forward to anything else he ends up writing, but it will be something that I save kind of like the latter part of the year when it gets to like Halloweeny time. Talking of vampires, I couldn't do a best books of the year of 2025 without featuring The Toxic Lesbian Vampire Story by V. Schwab, which is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. I absolutely adored this book. It was my first book by V. Schwab that I've read. I know she's been out for a long time, but I just haven't read anything by her before, and I absolutely loved it. I did end up also reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue in December, so I have now read 2 books by V. Schwab and can very much tell that her writing style is for me. But this one I absolutely loved. So we follow 3 different characters through 3 different kind of time periods. So we have Maria, who I think, is she South American? I don't know, give me like, yes, Santo Domingo de la Calzada. So that starts in 1532. So she ends up running away because she doesn't want to marry the person that her family is making her marry. And then she is the start of this kind of like vampiric tale of toxicity. So she ends up meeting this alluring stranger that kind of will help her escape the world that she's in, and she does. And then maybe it's not in the way that she intended, but it is what happens. And then in 1827 in London, we follow a new woman who will have some sort of crossover with the previous one, Maria, who again is like being suppressed by her family. She's like part of kind of high status, and again her life is being dictated by society and the family around her, and she doesn't want that to happen. And also she ends up having a bit of an intimate moment with one of her friends, which is very much forbidden at that time. So she ends up again being kind of forced into this marriage type situation that she doesn't want to be a part in. So when she sees a way out, she tries to take it. And then in modern day, we have a college student called Alice who has moved from Scotland, I think, to America to attend college because she's running away from kind of her childhood and her family home, etc. And she again ends up crossing paths with 1 or 2 of the other characters, and it's just really cool to see their stories developing over time. We do have 3 different POVs, and they do kind of jump in time, so it's not necessarily chronological order, but it's really cool to see how their stories eventually converge, and I absolutely loved it. It is one of my favorite books of the year. I think just calling it a toxic vampire love story is doing it a bit of a disservice. It's very much more than that, but I really enjoyed this, and I absolutely love this edition by FairyLoot. There are so many books. I don't know how many more I can go into in terms of like the in-depth, but I will quickly breeze through the next few. So the next ones, I read the entire series of The War of Lost Hearts by Carissa Broadbent, the first one being Daughter of No Worlds, and then we had Children of Fallen Gods and Mother of Death and Dawn. So this is the indie published version. It has now been picked up by a traditional publisher and it is being re-released. I absolutely love this series. It is one of my favourite kind of fantasy romance series that I have ever read. I actually loved this a lot more than Serpent and the Wings of Night, which I had read before this one, also by Carissa Broadbent, but this series is just so good. And again, we follow Tizana, who is a slave. She has a touch of magic that she's trying to develop, but doesn't really know how. And when she ends up she ends up killing her enslaver after she tries to get out from under him, under her contract, and he refuses to let her go despite what he promised. She ends up running and fleeing to pledge herself to the Order. So she ends up being picked up by them to start training essentially to develop her magical skills, and she is paired with Max and is forced into an apprenticeship with him. Max doesn't want to be a teacher, but he is forced to be one, and he's also got a very dark past whereby he was part of the war that has taken place, and he was the cause for why the war ended, and he saved a lot of people, but at a very much large cost that he doesn't want to revisit and doesn't want to admit. So we follow their story. It's really good. It's again quite dark, but definitely not grimdark. And it is, I just loved it. I loved the relationships in this. I loved the friendships. I loved even how the not necessarily good characters were developed, like the way that they were given kind of depth and complexity was really interesting. It wasn't just like a case of these people are good, these people are bad. It was all a bit murky. And yeah, another one that I really loved and would highly recommend. Next, another really anticipated read for me this year was Alchemized by Sen-Lin Yu. Just so that I just get it signed. And I've got here the art that came with the pre-order, which is really cool. I did get to meet Sen-Lin Yu this year, which was very cool, and I gave them a couple of pictures that I had made of our main characters, Helena and Kane, and I absolutely really loved this book. This was originally a fan fiction of Dramione, and it was published on AO3 as Manacled. I read that a couple of years ago, really enjoyed it. I ended up binding my own version. I obviously have very not great opinions of the original author of those works, but I do think that fanfiction is a whole different story entirely. So I did read that and I did enjoy it. And then when I heard that it was being kind of rewritten in a new world with new characters, with a new focus, as its own traditionally published work, I obviously pre-ordered it immediately. And it did not disappoint. Now, the storyline itself was very similar to Manacled, so it was really hard to kind of like not compare the two. But in terms of like the world building and the character building, I think in Manacled as well, it was different enough that you didn't really need the context or the lore of the original work to make it work. And I think in this one as well, it worked really well. It was very much its own magic system based around necromancy and alchemy. It was very much its own characters and its own storyline and world building, and I absolutely loved this book. I have a whole reading vlog where you can find out my innermost feelings about Alchemized. But yeah, I really liked this. I know there's like mixed feelings about this, but for me it really worked. And again, it was another one that absolutely emotionally destroyed me this year. And then another really anticipated read for me, which did not disappoint, was Catabasis by Arif Kwang. I ended up pre-ordering this when it was announced back in like, I think April 2024, and then it didn't come out until August 2025. So over a year I had this pre-ordered for, and I ended up getting another copy in my Fairy Loot box. So this is actually the Fairy Loot special edition, and the special edition that I had pre-ordered I ended up giving to my brother because I thought he would really enjoy it as well. So this is kind of like based on philosophy, a lot of kind of philosophy and philosophical ideals, etc., but also on the different representations of hell throughout literature, including like Dante's Inferno and other representations of hell in different history and cultures, which is really cool. But essentially in this one we follow Alice and Peter, who end up traveling to hell to save the soul of their supervisor, their PhD supervisor, so that he may write them a letter of recommendation to be able to go on to like the the 10-year fast track to go work in academia because it's really hard. And we kind of follow them as they descend into this hell world, and as I said, follow different philosophical ideas. We also touch upon different things in terms of like illnesses that people might struggle with, such as anxiety, Crohn's, and also just the way that like power is abused within academia, to especially over like women, etc. So I think actually when this book is set, women weren't even allowed to work in academia or even be part of PhDs. I think it was only after like a couple of years after this is set that actually that the first woman was allowed to take part in a PhD and be part of the academic world. So yeah, I really liked this. I know there's a lot of mixed opinions about this book online, and a lot of them are about how it's very much showing off and very like academic and stuff, but to me that's just R.F. Kuang's writing style. Like Babel was similar, and definitely Babel did focus on different topics. It was more about like colonialism and the British Empire, etc. But this was probably more heavy on the academia side of things, because it is set in academia, as in they are literally academics, they are PhD students, they're wanting to work in academia and become academic professors. So it does follow a lot around like research and just the world of academia in general, and to me that wasn't a bad thing. I quite enjoyed that. I just really liked it, and I really liked the way it explored things like anxiety and also kind of hidden disabilities such as like Crohn's, and yeah, I really liked all the different depictions of hell, but also how they were all brought together by similarities across the different cultures or historical tellings of it. So it's probably not my favourite book by R.F. Kuang, but I still really enjoyed it, and it is one of my favourite books of 2025. Next, another new author for me, but not for anyone else, is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. Again, this is grimdark, and this was my first exposure to Joe Abercrombie because it's a new book that came in the Epic Fantasy Fairy Loot subscription, so I ended up picking up first. I just realised this is all scratched. No! But yeah, I'd been wanting to read Joe Abercrombie for a while, but I have so many series that I still need to read that I was like, I should probably not pick up another one. But when this one came in the Fairy Loot Epic Fantasy, and I think this is a standalone, I can't remember, I was like, you know what, this is a good time to see if I enjoy his writing and whether the other series are worth investing in. Spoiler alert, yes they are. I absolutely loved this. This is a Suicide Squad-esque book whereby we follow this kind of band of ragtag misfits, all of whom are not good in some way, shape or form. They've done questionable things, and they end up being brought together to accompany a brother of a nearby church to try and put a thief on the throne before someone else takes their place. I'll say thief. We don't know that they're a thief right to start off, but yeah. I really loved this. Again, it's grimdark. I love the found family element of it, and I really enjoyed the writing style as well, and also it was just really funny at points and quite crude, and I really liked that about it. In particular, I absolutely loved two of the characters that now their names escape me, but I think it was Vigor and there's like this little elf creature that I don't remember the name of. Really loved it, really enjoyed it. I'm just really terrible at remembering names, but faces, really good at that. But yeah, really loved this, and I will definitely be picking up Joe Abercrombie in the future. I also read my first book by Rachel Gillig, which was The Night and the Moth, another book that came in the Fairy Loot sub box. And another one that I was very much pleasantly surprised with. I was looking forward to this. I'd heard good things by like early reviewers and stuff, and I really ended up loving it. It was very much people keep saying romantasy, but to me it's not romantasy. It's like fantasy with some romantic elements. I definitely don't think the romance is the core point of this book, but it is very gothic and very well, again, very well developed, and I really like the world building and stuff in this, and also the found family elements. I absolutely adored that. But in this one we follow Sybil. She's spent the past 9 years working, being forced, like the other girls that she like lives with, to essentially drown every night to be able to tell the fortunes of others, because she is a diviner. So she lives in like this cathedral type place, and the abbess oversees her and the other girls. Now when they get to 10 years of service they will be free, and so they're kind of pushing through the last kind of few weeks of their service. However, when they start hitting that 10-year mark, some of her other friends and like girls that she lives with start disappearing, and it coincides with the appearance of this like weird mysterious knight that is accompanying the new boy king. So she ends up trying to essentially befriend him in a way to work out whether or not he's the cause of those girls disappearing, and they end up kind of working together whilst also not trusting each other to find out what is really happening. And I really loved, as I said, the found family elements of it. The plot twists and stuff were really good, but also just the setting itself was really interesting. The way this book ended, I've said in a previous video, I was on the train when I was reading the end of this book, and I literally like gasped so loud that people were like looking at me funny, and I don't blame them, to be honest. I was literally like and it ends on a cliffhanger, and I really need to know what happens next. I don't know when the sequel's going to be published. I don't know if it's this year or next year, but I literally can't wait. And I think it's going to be a duology as well, which I'm very happy for, because I do love me a duology. Getting to the home stretch. Only 3 books to go. Although my throat is really hurting now. So another book I read this year that I absolutely loved was The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson, and they've actually recently announced the name of the sequel, which is, I don't remember, I'm going to put it here, but I'm super excited for this, because again, the way it ends, I really need to know. Like, there's so many plot twists in this book, it's insane. Like, I thought I knew where it was going, and then another plot twist would come up, and it was crazy. But I will quickly read the blurb for this, because I read it so long ago that I don't 100% remember exactly what happens. After 24 years on the throne, it is time for Burson the Brusque, Emperor of Oran, to bring his reign to an end. In the dizzying heat of midsummer, 7 contenders will compete to replace him. Trained at rival monasteries, each contender is inspired by a sacred animal: fox, raven, tiger, ox, bear, monkey, and the hound. An 8th, the dragon proxy, will be revealed once the trials have begun. 8 exceptional warriors, thinkers, and strategists, the best of the best. Then one of them is murdered, and it falls to the brilliant but idiosyncratic Nima Kra to investigate. But as she hunts for a killer, darker forces are gathering. If Nima succeeds, she could win the throne, whether she wants it or not. But if she fails, she will sentence herself to death and set in motion a sequence of events that could doom the Empire. So I really loved this. I was so pleasantly surprised, and I think this is definitely a fantasy series and author to look out for. I know they have written stuff in the past, but I had not read anything. Oh, this one's going to be a trilogy. I had not read anything by this author, but I'm pretty sure she does have other published work. But I really liked this. I liked the different POVs. I liked the time jump, because there is a bit of a time jump, especially between the beginning of the book and then kind of how it follows on, and it does all link back together, which is really cool. And as I said, I'm not usually a massive fan of murder mysteries, but the way it was incorporated into this book wasn't the kind of main focus of the story, and I just liked it. It was a very much like good element to add, and also to make those plot twists even more like shocking, which was cool. Another book I read that was very much an anticipated read for me was Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. I had read The Sword of Kaigan, I think in 2024, absolutely loved it, really enjoyed that book. I've actually managed to finally pre-order the Page and Wick special edition, which is stunning. I hated the fact that I had missed out on it last time, and I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to have that in special edition as well. But this is another standalone, Yes, this is another standalone by M.L. Wang, not related to the Sword of Kaigan at all, but set again in this kind of like fantasy world where you have this city that is kind of like inside of a dome, as you can see here, and then all of the surrounding area is not quite as fortunate in their resources, etc. But we follow Sayona, who has devoted kind of every living waking moment of her life to try and get into the University of Magic to be able to study magic, which is not something that women have usually been historically allowed to do. Eventually she is able to get that, but at a very high cost, which is she's not willing to kind of either accept or come to terms with, because she does end up doing something pretty awful that she just refuses to kind of come to terms with, that she has done that thing. But when she finally passes those qualifying exams and she is accepted into the magic school, she ends up kind of having to deal with the male counterparts that are also part of the program that don't trust her, and she ends up being paired not with a actual like lab assistant, but with a janitor who works at the university as well. However, he is also hiding a secret, and it ends up kind of setting off a chain of events, and all these like mysteries unfold, etc. And there's definitely something very, very horrific at play that they end up discovering and then trying to stop. And I really, really loved this. Again, it's one that I've seen mixed reviews about. I think some people said it was quite disappointing, but I really, really enjoyed the writing. I love that it's a standalone, because I know now that the story is done and dusted, and I quite liked how it ended, even if the ending was very much bittersweet. And I really liked it. I love Emma Wang's writing, so I'm very much looking forward to see what else they put out in the future, but I very much liked this book and I do recommend it. And then last but not least, this is the final book of the year. Well, I also read a novella related to this book, but this is the last book I read in 2025, and it is, again, one of my favourite books I read in 2025, which is fun. So this is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is part of the Bound and the Broken series. There are currently 4 books out and 3 novellas, I think. And I am currently halfway through book 2, so I've read book 1, the novella between book 1 and book 2, and I'm halfway through book 2, and I'm really, really loving it, and I'm pretty sure this is going to end up being one of my favourite series ever as well. Super excited. I've also booked to go see Ryan Cahill at an event in February, and I cannot wait. But yeah, I am absolutely binging this series right now. I will again read the blurb because my mind is wearing this. Is very tiring. Etheria is a land divided by war and mistrust. The High Lords of the South squabble and fight, only kept in check by the Dragon Guard, traitors of a time long past who serve the Empire of the North. In the remote villages of the southern Etheria, still reeling from the tragic loss of his brother, Kanan Briar prepares for the proving, a test of courage and skill that not all survive. But when 3 strangers arrive in the village of Middletown with a secret that they are willing to die for, Kanan's world is ripped from under him, and he is thrust headfirst into a war that has been raging for centuries. There is no prophecies, his coming was not foretold. He will bleed like any man, and bleed he will. Now, this is literally pure old school high fantasy. You've got orcs, you've got mages, you've got dragons, you've got elves. I absolutely love this. It's like if Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings had a love child. This is it. This is the love child, and I'm absolutely loving this series so far, and as I said, I think it will end up being one of my favourite series of all times. Sorry, my throat, my voice is going. But yeah, I absolutely love this, and I can't wait to see where this series goes, because I am really enjoying book 2 as well. Right, so oh my gosh, I feel like I've been speaking for hours. Like my voice. But yes, thank you so much for watching. That was a very long recap of my best and worst books of 2025, and I'm very happy to say that the majority were good books, and I did overall read more books that I enjoyed this year compared to 2024, especially that I gave higher star ratings to, and there were only a few that I kind of really thought were like not good. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please do pop a like if you enjoyed the video, and please do subscribe if you would like to see more, and let me know down below in your comments what your favourite or least favourite books of 2025 were. See you soon.